Welcome and hello. This is a video lesson in MODSIM DSS. And in this lesson, we're going to be talking about viewing results, specifically the on-screen plots. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. What you see on the screen here is the model schematic. Just as a quick introduction, we have an inflow node, a non-storage node, a non-storage node, and then two demand nodes, and then finally a sink. Associated with each of the inflow nodes, I'm labeling them inflow 1 and 2. There's a time series of inflow data. Same with data for the demand. This is a consumptive demand. And then finally, a sink. I'm going to go up and run the model real quick so we can view some results. It's asking me for a run confirmation. Yes, let's go ahead and run it. Okay, so that ran. Now let's go ahead and take a look at some of those results. So without any losses or any demands upstream of this link right here from inflow 2 to demand 1, we should see basically the sum of the inflow from these two nodes. In fact, let's go ahead and just take a look at the inflow data. Here is the inflow 1 data. So it ranges from 20 to about 43 acre feet per month over a 2-year time period, and there's a 1-month time step. And then over to the other non-storage node here has the inflow, which is a little bit different. It sort of fluctuates over the course of the year. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at those model results. So I'm going to right click on this particular link and then click on graph. This is what we're going to be talking about in this lesson, is this graph output and then all of its features. What we're seeing here is a time series data set associated with the flow rate through that link. And you can see that it starts down here at 42, and then it kind of comes up and down and up even higher in the second year with what looks like a max flow of about 75. And the units here are in acre feet per month. So if we then removed some water through these two consumptive demands downstream, we would expect the flow in this lower link from demand 2 to the sink to be less. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Remember, we had a max flow of about 75 here, and then this was about 63. So go ahead and close that. Then let's take a quick peek at this data. Right click, graph. Okay, a similar looking plot, except our peaks are a little bit lower. Now it's 63 and about 54. So just wanted to point that out. Obviously, here we would have somewhere in the middle because there's one demand that's removed the data. Looks like 69 and 57. All right, let's go ahead and go back to that first plot here. So I'll click on graph, then let's move this over here. There's more to just plotting the flow through a link. However, a lot of the display features and options that we have when viewing results are same for whichever results we're looking at. In the next video, we'll be talking about viewing results after exporting them, but this video is more about looking at the plots on the screen within the MODSIM interface. Okay, on this left panel here, this left axis is flow, so that's why we're seeing the flow rate, and we can change that to a different parameter. However, this is such a simple model. We don't have energy, we don't have we have flow, that's the only thing we have, volume. So some of these would actually pertain to different element types, not a link. And then the right element, as for the right axis, there's nothing on the right axis right now. I think power is just selected as a default, but it has basically the same options, except it's missing flow because that's already selected. So I'm just going to click off that. I don't want to mess with it. All right, below that, we have the flow graph style. So this is just line type or bar. Bar is more of a discrete period average type of look here, like a histogram. And then line is more of a continuous, where it's sort of doing an averaging or an interpolation between the changes. So I'm going to set it back to bar. And then in this drop down here, we're selecting which series of data that we're actually viewing here. If I click the plus button to expand, it shows me I have different options here, like the capacity, which is super high. So that kind of defeats the whole purpose. But if I had a smaller capacity on this link right here, I would see a number. So let's go ahead and set that. In fact, let's just set it to something large, but not too large, maybe like 100. So I'm going to go right click. Here we go. Properties. Down here for the capacity, we'll just say it's a maximum of 100. Click apply. Okay. I believe I have to run the model again. So let's say yes. And then let's close that and then reopen the plot here. Oops, hold on. Reopen the plot and graph. Okay, here's the same graph as before, but now if we could click on the not measured data, but capacity, there we go. So here's the capacity line right up here at 100. This gives us an idea of how much capacity we have left with regard to the current flow rate. That max capacity could change, but in this case, it's just constant. We can also add measured flow. We don't have any measured flow right now. And we can also add in last natural flow. Let's go ahead and add in some measured flow. So to do that, I'll go ahead and go to my right click on the link, click on properties. Let's move this right here. We have a tab here for measured flow. Oh, okay. I put this data in recently, but if you don't have it, you can type it in here. I believe you can also import it. So let's just toggle that checkbox on. Go ahead and expand that, and then measured flow. Oh yeah, we do have it. Okay. So according to the legend down here, the measured flow is the orange line, and then the actual calculated flow from MODSIM is the light blue line. Over in the main section here, we have two tabs. One is plot, that's what we've been looking at, and then the other one is data. We'll talk about data at the end of the lesson, but we'll talk about plot for most of the remaining part of this lesson because there's just a lot of options here. Within this options tab, we can clear the plot, and that does exactly what it says. It's just going to clear the plot. We don't want to do that. We'd have to reopen it to regenerate the plot. Next is chart options. Now, chart options has a lot going on, so let's move this over here. So we have chart, series, data, print, export, tools, animations, and themes as the main options here within the T-chart editor, it's called. You can see within chart, we have a number of sub tabs: series, panel, axis, general, title, walls, paging, legend, and 3D. So under series, which is currently selected, we have the different series. So if you wanted to only display one series of data or a subset of all the series of data, you can select that with the checkboxes. There's also options here to add, delete, title, clone, and change. The next sub-tab over here is panel. This is basically there's more sub-tabs actually. Borders, backgrounds, margins, gradients, and shadow. This is just to change the display of the plot itself. So if you wanted like a thicker border around the edge, if you wanted to change the margins or the background gradient or shadow, you can do that there. And then axes, this is the different axes for top, bottom, left, and right. You can modify how they look or how the values are presented. Next over is the tick marks. So that's just, the tick marks. And then labels. This is all associated with axes. So we're getting a little bit too detailed for what I want to describe to keep on time. But by all means, if you're really into fixing up your axes, then knock yourself out there. Okay, next tab is within chart is general, and then after that it's titles. So if I wanted to change the title from network 1 to something like link inflow 2 to demand 1, I think that's a little bit more descriptive of what we're looking at here. So I can just make that change. If I wanted to put a title at the bottom, I would just change this to footer and then type in some text down here. I'm not going to do that though. I'm just going to go back to header. Walls, paging, legend, and 3D. If we want to turn the legend off, we can do that. And yeah, so go ahead and check out those features if you're interested. I want to keep moving on though, because we have series right here. There's a number of sub tabs again: format, marks, general, and data source. So with format, for instance, if I wanted to change the color of this series, this is the orange one here that's selected is the measured data through that link. I can just click on color, change it to a different color, say red, and then OK. I can change the width of that line as well by just clicking on width. Also, there's this line mode that says stairs. This is similar to bar versus line up here, but I guess we have control at the individual series level. So stairs is basically bar or period average. So if you click on, oh no, it's for just that series. If you uncheck stairs, then it's basically like a continuous line that's smoothed out or averaged between data points. Stairs, it just basically keeps the constant value until the next change. The next subtab over here is marks. So if you wanted to actually add data points, you can click on visible and it'll actually add the data points right there. You can also add every other data point. You can come down here to draw every, and instead of 1, change it to 2, or every third, change it to 3. So that's how that works, but I'm going to just leave the data points off. The next subtab here under series is general. This is where we can specify the axis position. So right now it's bottom, but we could put it at the top. It almost looks like we have 2 date labels. So there's that. Let's just keep them both at the bottom then. and we can specify how the values are presented. Here's a particular pattern for values and also percentages. And then data source right here. I never really dug into this one. This looks pretty complicated because you can change it from manual to random to separate functions. And then within functions, you have a long list of different functions, ways that I believe you can just take your existing series data and then manipulate it. So I'm going to have to dig into this in a lesson that goes into more in depth and focuses on just this topic. But I assume a lot of people are going to want to export their results and post process those results in Excel or some other program, not necessarily within MODSIM. So I'm just going to kind of leave that where it is. Okay, so that's the series tab. Did I miss anything? Next over is the data tab. This is the data that is represented on the plot right here. Actually, let me go ahead and close this real quick. I'm going to toggle off the measured flow, so I'm looking at just the actual calculated flow through that link. And then let's go back to our options, chart options. Where were we? We were on data. Okay. So yeah, we can just manually change the data if we want for whatever reason. 42, 46, what is that? 55. So if we wanted to change the first two values to 55, then we would just start with a constant 3 months of 55 right here. I'm not saying you should do that, but you have the freedom to. So let's go 55, then 55, and then boom, the first 3 months are now 55, and that's what, acre feet per month. All right, the next tab over here is print. So what it's doing here is opening up the print window, and I can select the printer that's associated with my computer, as well as some of the print settings if I wanted to like print this out to PDF or to an actual piece of paper. So I'm not going to do that. Looks like there's some print setup settings as well, but I think you just click print and you're good to go. Next over is export. So this is something I'm more likely going to do, is actually export this to a specific image. So if I wanted to like say JPEG, for instance, and then let's go 100% quality and then save. Now it's asking where I want to save that JPEG. So let me just put it on my desktop and then I'll click on OK or save. Boom, here is my chart1.jpg. So there it is. Looks just like what we were looking at. But that's cool. The next tab over here is tools. And I have not looked into tools enough. It looked pretty in depth because if you click this plus button right here, you have a whole chart tool gallery. And I just, yeah, haven't had the time to dig into that. I think that's a little bit beyond the scope of the level of detail I want to cover here. The animation tab gave me a problem. When I clicked on that, the whole program closed. So I'm not going to click on that. And then themes, this is similar to what we saw already, where we can actually just click an individual theme and we'll see the entire display change to sort of give the entire chart a whole new look and feel. So instead of current, I'll go with black is back, opera theme, key chart original. That's the one I think we're looking at here. Microsoft Excel, Classic, XP, Web, Business, Blues, and Grayscale. So you can go ahead and create something weird like this manually with all the previous tools in the chart that we talked about. But if you wanted to have some sort of preset, then that's how you do it. You can also do a 3D view and change the color palette. Okay, I'm just going to go back to the original though. Here's T-chart original. Oops, I got to change this back to default and then remove the 3D. Okay, I think that's it. I'm just going to click close without clicking apply, and I think I'm safe there. Right, I think that was it for our chart options. That was this one here. We still have export, copy, and print. These are all pretty quick and have all, to a certain extent, been covered within the chart options. So if I click on export plot, okay, so let's not do that. What it did for me in my preparation was it actually exported the plot just like an image, just like that JPEG export. So that's nothing we haven't already seen. And then copy plot would actually just copy it onto my clipboard, which is what just happened. So let's go ahead and paste that and see what it looks like. Okay. So just like export plot, now I just have to do a save routine, and then let's save it to the desktop. And then boom, this should look just like what we exported earlier within the chart options. And then print, this is, again, just like we saw, it's going to open up a little print preview, ask me which printer. I can print the PDF. I have a PDF driver. And then, yeah, some other print settings. All right, so that was the options. The units allows us to just modify the units of the plot itself. So for instance, we have acre feet per month as our units of flow in that link. But if we wanted it to be different volume and different time, we can control that here. So the volume is currently acre feet, but say for instance, I wanted it to be cubic feet, then boom, I changed it to cubic feet. Okay. Yeah, no, I cannot seem to get that axis label to appear. Regardless of how wide I make the display, that's a little too bad. There may be some settings there to fix that, but anyway, the numbers also increased, so the math is still correct. If I wanted to change the time from instead of month or MODSIM time step, which I happen to have saved as month, to say second, that'd be, remember, cubic feet per second. Boom, I can do that. And now here are the updated values. And looks like our axis label is back, so that's good to see. And then the last option here under units is length, which doesn't really affect us right now, or at least this particular plot, because we're dealing with volume and time, not length. But yeah, we could switch that between feet and meters. That was the plot tab. The only thing to really discuss in the data tab is right here. If I click on data, what you want to do is click on this plus symbol right here, and then click on the name of the link of data that we're looking at. And then boom, here is our data. What we have is a column for start date and end date, and it also has this mid date for each time period. So for this particular simulation, our time period is 1 month. And I'm sorry that the text size is rather small, but I'll try to zoom in here. And then the flow rate is shown here. And then there's a few other columns, such as what measured data, capacity, minimum, channel losses. If you wanted to copy it and paste this data to Excel, you can just, yeah, select Control A, Control C. Let's go ahead and open up Excel and then just paste that in. So here's the data. It pasted in, but it doesn't have the headers. If you want the headers, then I guess you'd have to type that in, but you might not want the headers anyway. And there's other options to export. If you go up to File and then Export to Excel, I'm going to be talking about that probably in my next lesson. So stay tuned for that. But I just wanted to point out that there's two tabs here. There's Plot, which is what we talked about most in this video, and then there's Data here, so you can view the data that way as well.